Good evening. Tonight we are once again with Babu, and this time to talk about poetry, something we both love so deeply. How did you first become interested in poetry, Babu?
I don't know. I suppose from my childhood, because I've lived among poets, so I had that feeling. And in the beginning, as to when I was in Calcutta, I used to write a few lines here and there, but in Bengali. And then I came to the ashram, and in the ashram also, we used to have a handwritten magazine. So right at the beginning, I was asked to contribute something for that magazine, and there also I wrote one or two poems. But then, uh, and then after coming here, I had sent some of my poems, just a few handful. I had sent some of my poems to the Bengali magazines, and they had published them. So that is about all. And then I wrote a few things here and there on my own. But then I was asked to write for Mother India. That was in 1951. And I had sent some of my poems and some stories. Now I remember the first poem that was published. Um, you would like me to?
I would very much like you to.
Okay.
And Amal was in charge of Mother India at that
At that time,
time?
I was in charge,
Okay.
but he was not in the ashram. He was in Bombay at that
Okay.
time, and we used to send the poems. Not, I didn't do it. I don't remember to whom we gave, but that person was sent to Amal. So the poem that was published, and it was a red letter day for me. The title of the poem is Thou. When the day is done and light there is none, I wander, seeking thee. And in the gloom, as the starbuds bloom, thy formless form I feel, I see. Pervading the water, earth, and sky, it mounts up, mounts up high, until in thine own boundless vast I lose thee at last. In every heart I know thou art, I seek thee in thy myriad abodes, in flower in flowery meads of dreams and deeds, where man grows greater than the gods. And in every noble human shrine I see thee blazing, O divine, and I now stand at its luminous door to lose thee no more. So that was my first poem
Beautiful.
that was published. And then some stories were published, and I was given the rich sum of 51 rupees from Mother India for all the stories and poems. And I offered 50 rupees eventually to mothers, and 1 rupee I kept for chocolate. In those days, we used to get thick bars of what we called American chocolate for 50 paisa each,
Ah,
half a rupee each, and they used to be thick bars.
so, before we get into individual poets, when did you start teaching poetry?
I started first, that our initiation in poetry came from Temi Ben. She herself was a poet, and she also encouraged us to write a few poems. Then I wrote, and some of them she liked. I remember she had told me something. I don't remember the poem now. Uh, but then after that, once I started teaching, I used to teach English as a language and naturally literature. And whatever we had learned from Tame, I also used to try and teach them in the same manner. So, like that, I came to know uh, about poets and poems, and then I used to try and encourage them to write. Sometimes I used to succeed. Then gradually, as I started taking the higher classes, then I concentrated entirely on teaching poetry. Partly because I found that once the students um, left the school and went to the higher course, often they lost interest in poetry altogether. They didn't study at all. So in those days, I didn't teach in higher course. So I thought that I would make a kind of syllabus where they would have the taste of the very best in English poetry. But very best means I didn't dare touch the very modern poets because frankly I don't understand them much. And what I don't understand, I really don't know how to teach the children. So I made a syllabus which covered from the time of the Elizabethan age to the time of mid 20th century, that is T.S. Eliot, Auden, and Spender.
What about Dylan Thomas?
Pardon?
Dylan Thomas.
Dylan Thomas, no, I've never done.
No.
Never done.
So you went up to Spender.
But
You went as far as Stephen
as far as
Spender.
Spender and some of the others like John Masefield, Walter de la Mare, C.D. Lewis, and these poets, but not extensively in them. Mainly, I used to concentrate on the Romantic poets and some of the Victorian poets whom I admired, like poets like Browning, um, some things of Matthew Arnold, Meredith, and then, of course, A.E. and Yeats,
Yes, certainly.
and very much so. So these are the poets, and then Francis Thompson. He is one of my favorites.
I see. What works of his other than the one we all know?
There are these tiny little lyrics, like To a Snowflake. There's a very beautiful one. Then there's another one, but that we don't do much. Oh, The Kingdom of God. There's a very beautiful poem.
Oh,
Very, very beautiful poem.
Sri Aurobindo doesn't mention him to my knowledge.
Not much. He has mentioned it only once or twice in future poetry, just the name.
Not even Hound of Heaven.
No, not
I
even
see.
Hound of Heaven.
I see.
He has not mentioned.
So, from the beginning, tell us about your favorite poets. Browning, I know, is one.
Yes, Browning is, I love because, Browning is, although I don't much appreciate, because there's not so much of poetry in him, there's more of thought there in Browning. But poetry-wise, I think the Romantics are the very best, and A.E. and Yeats, they are also my favorites, especially A.E. A.E. we came to know when we were in Temibian's class, and it was absolutely love at first sight, because I just fell in love with his poetry.
Well, we are very much the same, because I think he's one of the greatest.
One of
I
his
think deeper occultly and spiritually than Yeats. Although Sri Aurobindo said he's not as great a poet as Yeats, but he's deeper.
That's it. No, and also I can understand, that when I try to analyze them, A actually is not, I think, at all appreciated in Europe, in England, and because I don't find his name except for his Babylon and sometimes his Frolic. All the other poems are just ignored. I'm really quite surprised. And I remember one little poem. It has touched me. It's called Dust. Just 8-line poem. He says, "I heard them in their sadness say,
Yes.
the earth rebukes the thought of God. We are but embers wrapped in clay, a little nobler than the sod. But I have touched the lips of clay. Mother, thy rudest sod to me is thrilled with fire of hidden day and haunted by all mystery.
Yes.
I think
Beautiful.
that's a marvelous poem.
The Man to the Angel I like a lot.
Absolutely.
So beautiful.
It's
Especially those last lines.
true. True.
What is it? The lips of the unknown rest tenderest upon my brow.
True. True.
And Krishna is marvelous.
Krishna is also marvelous, really. Krishna is marvelous.
Yes.
Only
So-
one thing about Krishna I find, means if we look at it critically, that he has not got the Indian ambience. That is, he uses certain words which just don't go with Krishna at all. For example, he says, I paused beside the cabin door and saw the King of Kings at play. Now, cabin door just does not go with Krishna, because Krishna was brought up among the cowherds, but the cowherd, he was the king of the cowherds. So he was a very well-to-do person and who lived in a palace. So it is not cabin door at all.
Okay.
Then in another stanza he says that he talks about the open tavern door. The exact line I don't remember.
Brawling.
Threw into the air a ruddy glare, and then I saw the King of Kings passing by, brawling through the starlit air. Now that is not Krishna at all, because I have studied a lot about Sri Krishna. We never find him brawling and all that. His brother used to get drunk, the older brother, who was always his companion. He was given to drinking. But Krishna never lost his sense. And we never find him drinking. Nowhere it is mentioned.
Now he says he took it from a
Some Vaishnava
Vaishnava
that's it.
manuscript.
Manuscript. But drinking, somehow, I just don't associate with him.
Okay.
But that's a very minor thing.
Yeah.
But when he says, he the golden urn where all the glittering spray of planets
In the
immediate
myriad beauty fall.
Oh my,
Yes.
what a line.
That's one of the great lines.
There's no doubt about it.
So of the earlier poets, the Victorians,
Among the Victorians, I've read quite a bit of naturally Tennyson, but Tennyson I don't rate him very high. But Swinburne, I like him for his music, for his rhythm. And there is another one line is a wonderful one, but unfortunately I'm unable to do justice to it. Like a god self-slain on his own green altar, death lies dead. Now that is the last line of a poem. About the Forsaken Garden. The title is The Forsaken Garden, but the last line really is something wonderful.
an interesting thing about Tennyson is that, I remained with Timmy for 3 years before she passed. I stayed with her. Sometimes, usually 7 hours a day.
Oh, I
talked.
see.
I lived in Golconda to be with her. And just before her passing, she would constantly ask me to recite Crossing the Bar.
Oh, that is a wonderful poem. And that is not the Tennysonian type. That is absolutely separate.
Yeah.
And it begins in a beautiful manner. Sunset and evening star, and one clear call for me, and may there be no moaning of the bar when I put out to sea.
Yes. You remember the whole poem?
I don't remember all,
But that's beautiful. Oh. So after Tennyson, you mentioned Masefield.
Masefield is also very good, very good. There is something, in him. There's one poem. It's called "Up on the Downs." It's a beautiful one. I don't know if I'll be able to manage the whole poem. Whatever I can give you.
Good.
Up on the downs, the red-eyed kestrels hover, eyeing the grass. The field mouse, like a shadow, flits into cover as their shadows pass. And then he talks about men burning gorse on the downs, and the air is all thick. Then he says that just one moment. Once in the downs, men were burning. No, once in the down, the tribe was burning, men in the frame, and they danced when their heads were turning, and the gods came. There's something really wonderful. I'm sorry that I'm messing up the poem.
My goodness.
But
That's all right. You know so much.
It's a very beautiful poem.
So
It's a very beautiful poem that he has seen sunset and all below the curve of the sail. Okay, and he says that I've seen distant lands, and then he says that but the most beautiful thing that I have seen are the delicate lines of her lips. So that is the thing that he has seen such a lot.
Yeah.
And how beautifully it goes. That is the curve of the sail that is making a kind of frame, and through which he has seen all these things. And then he compares the curve of her lips, the dear sweet curve of her lips, to that.
Beautiful.
That is something wonderful.
You and I had talked previously about T.S. Eliot, and we've both come to like him somehow.
No, T.S. Eliot, he sort of grows
Yes,
on you.
yes.
He grows on you. And especially, when I read Amal Kiran, he talks about one line of T.S. Eliot's love song of J. Alfred Prufrock.
Yes.
So he says that evening, the exact words I can't tell you, evening lying on the table,
Yes.
etherized.
Yes.
That line. And he has, Amal Kiran has written, I think, almost a page only on that line.
Like a patient etherized on a table. Yes.
So,
And that last line, that troubles the noon's repose is
true. No, I wanted to bring the books, then it would have been better.
Oh, we can do that. We can do that next time. Bring the books.
I'll bring some
I
books.
think that'll be a very good idea.
Because, this poetry should not be messed up.
Good. Agreed. I did want to ask you about a couple of others. And Sri Aurobindo mentions Stephen Phillips and Marpessa a number of times.
No, there's no doubt about it, because I've read them both, Marpessa and Christ in Hades, and I really found them wonderful. Unfortunately, he has not written much, and in these anthologies we don't find any representative.
But Spender? What
Spender,
what have
yes.
you liked of Spender? Other
Spender-
than, I think, continually of those who were truly
Yes,
great. which is-
there's a very, very fine one. But there is, this just happened that Auden and Spender both have written on the train. So Auden has written the night mail and Spender has written the express. And next time I'll bring them and I'll show you how interesting it is because they were friends that we know.
I see.
They were
Yes.
friends. And how they have chosen the same kind of subject. But Auden's poem I prefer more. Spender's is much more dignified and it is of a different type.
What about Auden's homage to Yeats?
Pardon?
Auden's homage to Yeats. William Yeats is laid to rest.
I don't know. No.
I've read it many times.
Acha. No.
And the seas of pity lie locked and frozen in each eye.
Oh, yes. No, that is the thing, that sometimes some of the lines, if you pick them up, then they're absolutely outstanding.
Yeah.
Outstanding.
So what are the latter poets before mid-20th century, you said?
20th century, mainly, you see, after Browning, we do a few, means I'm telling you what we study usually, what we teach in the school.
Yes.
So we do a few like, war poets like Rupert Brooke. That also we can't do much, because I have to cover nearly 400 years in 3 years. 400 years.
Sassoon is another one. Siegfried
Siegfried
Sassoon.
Sassoon, yes, definitely. Siegfried Sassoon.
But there's not a lot there.
No. Because, they are just represented by one or two poems here and there.
Yeah.
And there also, I have to make a selection. You see, because I have to think in terms of how much time is available, how much I can cover with the students. So, mainly those only what I teach, I mostly study those.
And have you found any truly budding poets in all of your years of classes?
There is one boy, he has quite a lot in him. He is in England now. He is doing his PhD on Samuel Beckett. And he is all for modern poetry. All for modern poetry. He writes really well. Once in a while he sends to me what he has written. But he has got something. I don't know if he will go in for poetry. Because, he has to think of his career and all that also.
Can we just touch for a few minutes on Sri Aurobindo's poems other than Savitri?
Oh, yes.
Because Savitri for us
I know.
is
Savitri
there's nothing higher.
I mean,
But some of
nothing
these other
comparable.
poems that you have really
some of the poems I teach the students once in a while, and the poems like Who, God's Labor, these two poems the students learn quite early. That is, they teach us in the lower classes.
Yes.
It's not that they understand everything, but they study them and they learn them by heart. Sometimes they recite them. When they come to me, once in a while, I don't get much time unless, some students want to do Surinder's poetry, shorter poems, then they come to me. And usually I teach them Baji Prabhu and that is one of my favorites, and Love and Death. These two. Sometimes to little bigger children is Urvashi. So these three poems, the longer poems we do. And of the shorter poems, his revelation is something out of this world. Someone leaping from the rocks, past me ran between blown locks. So that is absolutely out of this world.
And the sonnets?
And the sonnets also. Sonnets, one sonnet I constantly quote to them because, there is a corresponding thing in Browning. Browning says, "What is our failure here but triumph's evidence in the fullness of the days?" In Art Vogler, he says that failure is really a step on the way to success. So failure should not be taken too seriously. It is a triumph's evidence in the fullness of the days. Then in Rabbi Ben Ezra, he says, just one moment. Sorry, the other
We'll bring
lines.
the books. We'll bring the
next
books
time I'll
next
bring
time.
the book
Yes.
and I'll tell
But
you.
anyway, the comparison.
I'll just tell you this much. So Browning also says the same thing, that failure is actually should be taken as a way for success, and it should not dishearten you. Now there are two lines in the Divine Worker by Aurobindo, and those I find really very inspiring. He says, "Failure is cradled in thy deathless arms. Victory is thy passage, mirrored in fortune's glass." What a lovely way of describing, and Aurobindo, how he got the idea of, because it gives you that image as though the mother is teaching the child to walk, and naturally she is standing at a distance. The child takes some wobbly steps and then falls down. What does the mother do? She immediately comes and picks him up. So we get that picture when he says, "Failure is cradled in thy deathless arms." There's all our failures God accepts. And they're cradled, we're very close to God when we fail. And then he talks about victory as though there is a mirror of fortune, and victory is the passage mirrored in fortune's glass. It's as though victory should not be given too much importance. Because victory is not the final thing. Next moment there may be another failure. And yet we get overjoyed when we are victorious. But victory is merely passage of God, mirrored in fortune's glass. Now, that I find truly wonderful.
For more than 50 years, a God's labor
That's it.
has been so powerful to me. Can you speak about a few of the lines in a God's labor?
No, I'll need the books,
Okay.
because you see what happens sometimes that when I'm teaching at that time the lines come.
Sure.
But sometimes, it is a trick of the memory. When you want to remember, then they escape.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.